I think a good clue today's also on egolessness was at the beginning there, at the very beginning. You know when Master Okawa stood there and he said, the one standing before you is you Okawa, but it is not you Okawa? That also is the clue to what it means about this egolessness. You know, we are looking at Master Okawa, or looking at a person in the human body, and it's easy to see him as this person standing there in that human body. Oh, he's a human being. That's you Okawa. That's him. What he's saying is, this is not me. And it's the same for all of us. This human body is not me. There's something behind this human body. I'm living the human experience through this body. But there's this being, there's an eternal being that's lived in eternity and travels through future eternity, has many different lives as I live in this life, in this world over and over again, but incarnating between this world and the spirit world for the purpose of refining my soul and developing my soul. But this, when Master Okawa said, I am Yuho Okawa, but I am not Yuho Okawa, what he's saying is that he's descended from this consciousness called Alcantari, and Alcantari is speaking to the world through Yuho Okawa. So when you hear the idea of being egolessness, and then he says, I am the one with all authority, right? And yet he's egoless, because he is God, he is the light itself. So he is the law itself. So there is no ego there, it's just the truth. He is the law, he is the light, he is the one from heaven. So when he says, I am the one with all authority, that's not based on ego, that's just based on the truth of who he really is. So it seems odd, doesn't it, to be able to say, I have all authority and I'm egoless. But if we can understand the idea that it's not Hugh Horkawa as a human body that's saying, I have all authority. It's Alcantari in the heavenly world. It's the one who created human souls. It's the one where the energy that comes by to sustain all souls every day, all the time. That is who is speaking through Yu Horkawa. Because if you want to spread the truth to the world, if you want to tell all the people in the truth, how can God do that? What is the best way for God to speak to all the people? Now some people might say, well, why doesn't he just speak to all of us in our minds? From heaven he could just speak to us in our minds. But as we learn in Happy Science, you can only tune your mind into whatever state in the other world that your mind is in the same frequency with. So if you have the mind of an angel, you can hear the words of angels. But if you have a mind that's full of negativity, you could be hearing words from devils. And there's many people in the world today that hear thoughts that they say, God spoke to me, and God told me to kill this person, or God told me to blow myself up, or God told me to jump in front of the train. So you don't know it's God. A voice coming into your heart, a person, there's many people in the psychiatric wards that say they hear the voice of God. So a person doesn't know really if they're hearing the voice of God. But what if God, there's that song, what if God was one of us? That beautiful song, what if God was one of us? And in this case, Yuhokawa, he is, God is one of us. If God wants to speak to the world, the best way for God to speak to the world is to be born into this world, to grow up, not knowing who he is, to attain enlightenment, and to be able to discover his true self, and be able to speak to the world thoughts directly from heaven. That is the most surefire way to get the truest message to the people on earth, is for God to be born on earth and speak with his mouth to our ears and to our hearts directly. And that's why Master Okawa has been born as Yu Horkawa on earth, speaking the words of God. I mean, Jesus did the same thing. Jesus said, I'm the Son of God. Now, so it might be hard for people to believe that Yu Horkawa is come from Alcantari, but really it's no more difficult than to believe that Jesus was the Son of God born on earth. Someone so close to God is to be able to say, I'm the Son of God. I'm the closest to God there is in this, in the this life, in this world, in the other world. I'm the Son of God. I'm right next to God. There's not much difference to be able to say I'm the Son of God than it is to say that God could also incarnate on earth and speak to people. So today's topic is what is egolessness, and it's very much connected to the idea of Master Okawa being in a body, but also being the person or the being that's behind that, that's not really just the body. So what is egolessness? Well, to start off, it means in Sanskrit the word anatman, which literally means no self. So in Buddhism, when the Buddha taught that you have no self, there is no really you, this is the teaching of egolessness, there was a wrong view in Buddhism that developed, and it meant that they thought that meant that, there is no me, I don't really exist. So that means that when I die, I no longer exist. So what they started to believe was that I'm going to live in this world, and if I can attain enlightenment, once I attain enlightenment when I die, my self has been extinguished because I've got rid of my ego, and poof, I'll just disappear. And Master said this is not the truth. The truth is that based on this teaching of the three seals of Buddhism, which was impermanence, egolessness, and nirvana. The teaching of egolessness was the idea that all phenomena, the egolessness of all phenomena is the idea that all things are essentially non-substantial, and therefore there is no self or ego in anything made of matter. But that did not mean that everything disappeared. It just meant that this matter doesn't really exist. This matter is not something substantial. It appears to exist for a period of time, but eventually it won't exist. But that doesn't mean that what was creating the matter, the thought behind the matter, didn't exist. And I think, I think one of the easiest ways to think about this is to think of an ice cube. If you think of an ice cube, right, it's solid and it's fixed, and that's an ice cube. But what about when the ice cube melts? Okay, when the ice cube melts, it just becomes water. It's not an ice cube anymore, is it? So what's the difference? It's still the same amount of water. It's just something that's changed form. It's changed from an ice cube into water. And actually that very same water could become mist. And when it becomes mist, it could become vapor. It could actually go into the air and you can't even see it anymore. I mean, if I put that water from that ice cube, let it evaporate into the sun, it's disappeared. But has it gone? Does it still exist? It still exists somewhere. It could actually then become a part of a cloud. A cloud is actually just water vapor that's under a different set of circumstances started to show. And I don't know if you've ever had days where you're watching the clouds and you see clouds, and sometimes clouds, you can be watching them and they start to disappear. And they go into nothingness. So where does that cloud go? And this is really much the idea that matter is void, void is matter, the teaching in Buddhism. The idea that things can show up into a form and then it can change form into another form. It hasn't actually gone away, it's just changed form from one place to another, one existence to another. So Master said that that's the main thing to understand with this Buddhist idea about egolessness, is that it doesn't mean that you just disappear. It doesn't mean when you die that there's nothing. He said about 50% of Buddhist teachers or people following Buddhism tend to believe this idea that if they study the teaching and they attain enlightenment, when they die, they're going to disappear and go into the nothingness. He said that is not true, because the human soul has individuality. Each one of us has an individual nature that's been created over a period of time. So this character that was created, what it actually is made from, that each soul was being made from light. So God created human souls with an intention that each soul would have an individual nature. So each one of us has got this self within that's a spark of God. It's a piece of God. It's the light of God. So at our heart, at our core, every one of us has this spark. God created us with the intention of creating individual souls. So each one of us was created by God, as a part of God, as a piece of God put out there and said, become like me. God said, become like me. It's like the oak tree putting an acorn out there that says, become like me. So God put individual souls, or part of his energy, into each one of us. But he enjoys the individuality. So it's wonderful that we all have individual nature. By having individual nature, each person can shine in their own unique way. It's like musicians. If one musician can become great like Mozart, and then another musician can become great like Michael Jackson, they're both great. They're both very, very different. They're both very unique, right? So you cannot say that one is not great just because you don't like that type of music. They're obviously very great people. And the same with different artists. Different artists paint different things. But just because they do different art, that doesn't make them any better or worse than each other. The key thing is that each one of them is manifesting their own brilliance in their own way. And that's what God or Buddha wants each one of us to do, is to be able to grow and grow and grow and become closer and closer to Buddha and become more and more like him through manifesting our own inner light. So once we leave this world, we actually do go back to another world. We don't just suddenly go poof. We're going to maintain our character. And we're going to talk about some of this as we go along, about the idea of developing this character. But Master said about our creation, he said that the individuality of the soul is a unique manifestation of each individual, originating from the light of Buddha and undergoing spiritual discipline through numerous incarnations. So this is the truth of our life, that God created us. He created the soul. And then that soul, he decided that for the best thing for that soul to be able to develop is you can incarnate between lives between this world and the other world. So once we leave this world, we actually don't just disappear. As I said, we go to the real world. The real world is the world of true existence, because that world never disappears. Even in this world things disappear, But in the other world, you see, it's a world of thought, and thought it just exists. You don't need to have, physical matter breaks down, but thought contained in God's light or in God's world, it actually continues to exist forever. There is a thought, though, as Master said, that even beyond that, things exist because God wants them to exist. I mean, we exist because God decided it was good to create us, and He continues to hold that thought. If at any time God decided that it wasn't such a good idea anyway, He could turn off that thought and all people could stop to exist. But He's guaranteed human beings that I give you eternal life and you will exist forever. But it's a little bit like, these different stages of existence. Like you could think of our lives like right now. You imagine a film playing, right, and there's a projector. And we're watching the film. So our lives in this world are like watching a movie. And each one of us are playing different actors on the stage, right? Thinking that that's really me. That's me, But actually we're really just playing out a part in the movie in the conditions that we've been given, right? But behind that, there's a light that shoots through the projector. The light could be like God's light, that's enabling the whole thing to undergo. Then we've got the film that it comes through and it projects onto the screen. But, real understanding egolessness is to recognise that we're just playing this part in this role that we've been given. Once we leave this world, we could go back to the other world and be incarnating again in like 300 years or time, and we could be in a completely different position, which is like being an actor in a different role in a different play. But what's important is how we play our parts. That's the most important thing, is that no matter what situation we're thrown into, how will you play a part? And it seems exciting when we're in it, just like when we watch a movie. A movie's not real. We watch the movie and we know it's not real, right? But we still get excited and we're all still tense. I mean, in a scary movie, we're afraid. And in a romantic movie, we're crying and we're full of love and we hope that things are going to work out. But we know it's not real, but we still feel it. It's the same in this world. We feel it's so real. But the truth is actually we're just actors playing our parts to see how we will be under these different conditions. And every moment is an opportunity for us to show our divine nature, to show our true self, and to overcome our false self, the self that just wants to protect ourselves. So this other world must have said that, as we've got this physical body now, when we leave this world, even I've got a physical body, when I leave this world, as I said, we don't just go poof and disappear. What we go back to the other world with is, we have an astral body, right? So when we drop this physical body, what we actually have next is a physical body. An astral body. So if we look at this picture here, for instance, here's my physical body, right? But in this physical body, I have my spiritual body, or my soul. And my soul takes on the shape of my physical body. At the core of my soul is my heart, or my mind, which Master said is located here. But around the outside of my spiritual body is my astral body. Okay, so when I go back to the other world, I'll actually drop my physical body, I go back to the other world, I take my mind, but I have my mind at the core, but I also have this spiritual body. On the outside of that spiritual body is my astral body. And I found this really fascinating when I was studying the book, because all of these teachings today come out of this book, The Challenge of Enlightenment. And let me put this light back up. Chapter 4 in The Challenge of Enlightenment, what is egolessness? And it's funny, Master's written so many books, over 2,100 now, and so there's never-ending study to go on and learning to go on with this delving into the truth. But so many things you come across and you think, oh wow, that's amazing. So something as I was studying this that I had maybe read before and forgotten about, that I found was really interesting, was that he said that when we leave the fourth dimension and go up to the fifth dimension, to the higher realms, you cast off your astral body, which is left behind in the fourth dimension. And so once you move into the fifth dimension, you're actually just living in a spirit body without the astral body. So the astral body is really the body of the fourth dimension. I mean, there's three-dimensional world. This is my body. The fourth dimension, the astral realm, there's an astral body. But when we move up to the fifth dimension, which, as he said, is really the beginning of heaven, we discard our astral body. And something that was also really, really interesting, and I know it's more like the metaphysical side, which we like to learn about, but we don't dwell on it too much because it doesn't really help save us. It doesn't help us improve us and help us develop ideal societies, but it's always nice to know the truth. In here, as he said, part of it, which I found so fascinating, was he said that when we drop these astral bodies and move to the fifth dimension, the astral body stays in the fourth dimension, and these astral bodies still exist, and after a while they lose their shape as human form. And after a while, sometimes they're gathered up. And I'd like to know more about this, but they're gathered up and used to create new astral bodies. So, oh my gosh, there's so much happens in that other world, in the spirit world, that we really just don't know about. It's a whole new set of laws and conditions. But that somehow these astral bodies, the energy from the astral body, can be gathered up and reused to create new astral bodies. I thought, oh my gosh, once we leave this world, the understanding of the truth and understanding about how things really work, it also continues. You know, there's things beyond this world. Like I said, you know, I remember seeing once that truth is far stranger than fiction. And I think this is this whole idea of truth is far stranger than fiction. So once we discover what's actually really the truth, it's far stranger than anything anybody could ever make up. So I found that was really intriguing. Yeah, somehow these astral bodies are used. I did read a book many years ago called The Soul's Journey by a guy called Richard Leaulu. And he described a similar thing. This was at the same time as I found Happy Science Hour. And he was taken through, he was suffering because his brother had died, and he was taken through the different dimensions that Master Okawa also explains about. But what they spoke about was how as he moved up to each dimension, he left a part of his body behind, you know, his spiritual body behind. So the astral body, and then maybe an emotional body, as he moved up through the dimensions. So it was very fitting that this is a similar idea. Okay. So when they say that there's, in Buddhism, that, when you die, that everything vanishes, that there's no self, we've got to realize this isn't true. You're going to actually have your soul. I must have said that in most cases we continue to live in the other world after death in the form of a spiritual body, which could be called a soul, and it still takes human form. And this transmigrates between this world and the other world. Now, when he said in most cases, what does he mean in most cases? And as he continued to say, he said that, well, there's two types of reincarnation. He said, it was according to Shakyamuni Buddha that anyone who attains enlightenment can escape the cycle of reincarnation and will no longer need to be born on earth. Okay, so I know I've met people who have said to me, this is my last life. Right? And I've thought, well, actually, it doesn't seem likely that this could be your last life because, I mean, even Buddha and Jesus reincarnate back to earth to bring new teachings. And so what Master said, though, is there are two types of reincarnation. You know, there's one type that where the people, they leave and they go into the human form up to the light realm of the sixth dimension. And we've spoken at Happy Sides before about the different stages in the other world. And that from this world we've got the fourth, the fifth and the sixth dimension, which I'm going to show a chart in a second. But these are different stages of development of the soul. But he said up to the top of the sixth dimension, we still look like human beings. Souls still look like it, take on the shape of a human. So the people you see in the other world, when you leave this world and go back to the spirit world, they're going to be looking as they looked, as a human being. But once people pass from the sixth dimension into the seventh dimension, they no longer take on the shape of a human being. They start to just basically take on whatever shape they like, which is often just a ball of light, because they don't identify with themselves being human anymore. They just become consciousness. So Master said, yeah, in the higher worlds, in the seventh dimension and above, most souls do not take human form. So this is the chart of the spirit world. So as we can see, this three-dimensional world at the bottom here, which is where all the souls that from all the different dimensions have come. So this fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth. I mean, the ninth dimension is the realm of the Saviour, people like Jesus and Moses, and in this case now Master Okawa. The eighth dimension is the realm of the great angels and archangels, and the seventh dimension, the angelic realm. So the seventh, eighth and the ninth, these souls that would exist in that realm, they no longer have human form. They're just great balls of light, great balls of consciousness. But in the fourth, fifth and sixth dimension, fourth, fifth and sixth, they still look like human beings. I mean, in the fourth, they still have their astral body. And the astral body, and that's because they still associate with themselves as being the body. I mean, Master said this fourth dimensional realm is really a realm of instinctual love, and souls that are living there continue living very similar to what souls living on earth. They still believe that they're actually this body and associate with themselves with their body.
Steve, I've got a question.
Yeah.
Dimension number 4, the posthumous realm.
Yeah.
What's the meaning of posthumous?
The posthumous realm. So this is the realm straight after death. So the post-human. So after being human, the first place you go. So once we go into the fourth dimension, Master Okawa said that we all, just about practically everybody goes there straight after death, and from there it's decided which realm they will go to next. So in the posthumous realm is where people go to the dome of where they reflect on their lives and see their lives, they see their past lives. So people leave this world, cross the river Styx, which is the consciousness between this world and the other world. We have, as Master described before, we have a silver cord which connects our body to our soul. Once we cross this river Styx, which is really a divide in our consciousness between this world and the other world, once the silver cord's cut, the soul can no longer return to the body, and we go into this fourth dimensional posthumous realm, and in there we get a chance to review our lives. And once we review our lives, based on our truth, based on our conscience, and based on the reality of exactly what sort of person we've created and the sort of person we are, from there we will go to whatever is the most fitting place for us to go. If we've created the mind of an angel, then we will ascend to an angelic realm. If we have created the mind of a leader, we could go to the sixth dimension. If we've created the mind full of love, nurturing love, or not nurturing love, just a realm of love that gives, a realm of wishing well on other people, enjoying other people's happiness and not enjoying other people's suffering, then we'll go to the fifth dimension. If we've created a mind that just believes, this is me, there's no life after death, this body is me, this is me, then we'll continue to live in the fourth dimension. But if we've created a mind of hatred or anger or greed or some sort of resentment and full of negativity, then at the bottom of the fourth dimension, at the bottom realm of the fourth dimension, is a realm called the hell. So hell is just a very small place, but it's like the sludge of heaven. It's the place where negative conceptual energy has gathered. So if your mind is tuned into that way of thinking, you'll be with like-minded people. So it's all about, it's actually very simple, the teaching of happy science. It's all about the wavelengths of your mind. If you've created a mind that's very light and airy and full of love and goodness and no attachments, then it can be free to go up high. If it's full of attachments and full of resentment and full of anger, things like this, then it naturally has a weight and it just is down. So you can see that this is all about the buoyancy of the soul.
So what the terms I wanted to clarification of is the Nyorai and Tathagata. What is the Nyorai and Tathagata?
So Tathagata is like it's the same as the archangels. So Nyorai is like the high spirits, the very high spirits. Yeah. So it's like an archangel. Yeah.
I see. Any examples of Nyorais and Tathagatas?
Probably we're going to come across one in a minute, actually. Einstein, we're going to see Einstein. Einstein lives in that realm, but also people like Lincoln live in the eighth dimensional realm. Great leaders. Also people like Edison, great inventors. People who've changed the world in some way.
Is Walt Disney there?
Walt Disney, probably. I'm not too sure. Okay, so Master said, as they begin to exist only as entities of consciousness, they are no longer bound to reincarnate as ordinary souls. So this is the two different types of reincarnation. Yes, souls up to the top of the sixth dimension are bound by their karma to reincarnate. So however we live in our lives in this world will make a difference to what situations we're born back into this world. I mean, Master gave an example previously. He said that, if there was a man who tended to beat his wife, he, as his karma, he might be born back into this world, and he might be born as a lady being to an abusive husband. So he could experience what he'd put her through, so then he would know what was wrong. So up to the top of the sixth dimension, we're drawn back into this world by our karma. But once people go past the sixth dimension into the realm of the angels, the realm of altruism, then they've gone beyond the human experience, really. And instead of living for themselves, they live for others. They've discovered how they've become one with God and the mind of God. So once souls reach that realm, they're no longer bound to be reincarnated. They're never drawn back. They actually choose. It's their will that dictates, I'm going to be born here. And if you think about it, because some people, as I said, have said to me, this is my last life. But if you had the mind of an angel, this is all about developing the mind of becoming the mind, having the mind of an angel, becoming an angel. And the mind of an angel sees all of us as one, seeing another's suffering as my suffering, and another's happiness as my happiness. So when a person has that sort of mindset, when you see another person happy, you feel happy. And when you see another person suffering, you'll feel their suffering and you want to help them. That's why in Happy Science we learn the teachings so that we can try to help people out of their suffering, because it's the words of wisdom, it's the teachings of the truth that can take people away from their suffering. So since you have that mind, if you got back to the heavenly world, and you're looking down from the heavenly world and it's a wonderful place full of bliss, and you see the people on earth and so many people are suffering, of course you're going to say, I'm glad I escaped that cycle of reincarnation. I'm glad I'm away from that suffering up here in this wonderful land of bliss and happiness now. I never want to go back there again. If you had the mind where their suffering was your suffering, you would be seeing it and you'd be saying, I cannot stand to stay here in this world of bliss and enlightenment while all these people down below on that earth are suffering. I must go back down to help them. Because you'd also know that's only temporary. I can live here forever, and I live in eternity anyway. So it doesn't really matter. I can go and spend 70, 80 years in that world and undergo suffering and difficulties, which will also be good for me and teach me a lot, and I can train my soul and polish my soul. So it's good for me. It's actually good for my soul to do it. And also, how can I stay here in this wonderful land of bliss when these people are suffering? I think actually even people in armies are often like that, because people in armies that go to other countries to try to help people, they put their lives at risk. When these guys can get killed, they can get blown up. But why? Just because, it's not because they want to shoot people and kill people, it's because they see people who are being treated badly. They see countries where people are, often just innocent citizens are being treated badly, and they want to help them, and they want to take them out of their suffering. So it's the same way, people willing to put themselves into difficulty and hardship to try and help other people. This is the mind of egolessness, or feeling of oneness with other people. So Master said here, their reincarnation is determined by their own will. It's not a kind of compulsory reincarnation ordinary people have to experience at 200 or 300 year intervals in order to reap their karma. So he said previously that on average, the average soul, it'll be about 200 or 300 years between their incarnations. So a soul from the 4th, 5th or 6th dimension will generally incarnate about every 2 or 3, maybe 400 years from the other world into this world, live for the 70 or 80 years in this world, and then go back to the heavenly world and live for 400 years, and then be born again. So we spend more time in the other world, but we incarnate here periodically to train and develop the souls and to reap our karma because of whatever we've created. It's cause and effect. Whatever you cause, you're going to get back sometime. See, it might seem sometimes in this world that there's no justice. People who might live really terrible lives, but they seem to have everything, and they lead to this world, and it's like, how can there be justice? These people, they live like that, but look, they would seem to be so lucky. But because of the long-term plan, because of when you see things through eternity, everything comes back eventually. So if people seem to do things wrong in this world, and they seem to have died and got away with it, and they just seem to be so lucky, no, eventually, unfortunately for them, everything catches up with them. So, we have to live our lives always based on this idea of eternity, that every good action will have a good result eventually, and every bad action has a bad result eventually. So life is really about constantly trimming away the negative, having the wisdom to understand what is right and wrong. That's the first thing. Sometimes you don't even know it's wrong. So sometimes we can be hurting people and we don't even realise we're hurting people. Doing that and trying to then, that's just the one side, the passive side, not doing bad. But on the other side, planting good seeds, because planting good seeds creates a good harvest in the future. So living on earth is a wonderful opportunity to plant good seeds. It must be much harder to do good things in heaven. I mean, in heaven, maybe we can help people who've passed away, and we can live our lives trying to benefit other people and give them guidance and send them inspiration. But in heaven, it must be so much harder to actually benefit people truly, because what can you do? People in heaven have everything they need. There's nothing really they want. They don't need a job. They don't need money. There's nothing they really need. They have God's light given to them all day, every day. So people are living really nicely. But on this earth, there's so many people who need help. And it's when we're in these difficult circumstances, for us to be able to overcome the desire for self-protection and to be able to instead live our lives trying to help other people, every time we do that, we're planting a seed that will one day flourish and have a wonderful result in some way in our own lives. So let's watch, you're talking about before different great figures of the past. So as Master was saying that, once people get from the 7th dimension above, they, instead of associating with themselves as being a human, they become truly egoless, I guess you could say, because they recognise, I'm not a human being, I'm just this energy, I'm just this consciousness. So this is a little excerpt that was out of the Laws of the Eternity, or the 9 Dimensions book it's now called, where these couple went and visited various dimensions. Well, this is up now, they're entering the 8th dimension, and they're about to see Einstein, and he just gives a nice description about the enlightenment of the 8th dimension.
must be the great scientist I respect.
Why is it that you think so? Is it the way I look? This is only because I'm showing myself like that. In this world, we don't have to bear our mortal appearance anymore. You could say I'm a luminous substance who excels in physics. In the 8th dimension, Tathagata realm, although there are around 500 beings similar to me, it is impossible to count us on the basis of mortal numbers. And that is because I am able to break up into infinite numbers. One is all, and all is one. This is the enlightenment of the 8th dimension, Tathagata realm. We don't measure things the way you do. Even time cannot be used as a measuring tool either. Over here in the spirit world, we do not have a set of time, since this is a world in which past, present, and future are all found to be one.
So, when he said there, the enlightenment of the 8th dimension is all is one, one is all. That could also be the complete understanding of egolessness. You think of God as one, God is everything. All is one is God, all God is all. So that if we think of as God as being the one, and God has created all these individual souls, that, as we saw Einstein there, separate himself and then able to come back to the one again. So there is no difference between us and God. We ourselves are just like a part of God expressing itself in a different way. So the more we can understand our divine nature and believe that I'm one with God, then, and the more that I want to show my divinity, and less I want to become the individual that shows my individual nature, my false self, then the more I can become egoless. So the more I can really associate with myself as being the self that's part of God, the more I can become egoless. Yeah. So this one is many, and one and many is one is really ultimately the idea of egolessness. So how do we become egoless? This is a key thing to think about. Well, one of the reasons why Buddha taught about egolessness was to teach that how to get out of suffering, because by having an ego is what makes people suffer. The root cause of suffering is our ego, because at the root of attachment lies the ego or self, the thought of I or me. In other words, a self-centered, biased perspective based on what is convenient. So, and it's this perspective that actually causes suffering. That's why people suffer. There's this I, there's this me. And I wrote this, and there's a bit of a long sentence here that came out of the book, and I copied it down, because it really, as we read this, you go, oh yeah, that's definitely, we all think like this sometimes. So when it comes to this idea of this I or this me, it's this part here. It must have said, if there's no thought, this is me, there will be no thought, this is mine. You may think, he is my lover, she is my wife, they are my children, they are my parents, this is my home, this is my land, this is my camera, this is my purse, this is my money, this is my checkbook, this is my business card, this is my desk, this is my chair, this is my tombstone, and so on. First there is the thought of I or me, and this leads to the idea, this is mine. Your sense of possession gives rise to attachment. How much of that? We all think that, don't we? This is my chair, that's my desk. I mean, you think about all the problems in life come along when you have this thing of, this is mine. And I remember recently, it was so sad, there was a guy who was a New Zealander living in Australia, so I felt a little ashamed that he was a New Zealander living in Australia, but he killed his girlfriend because she had left him. And he chased her down in his car, and she ran into a fire hydrant or something, and so while she's trapped in the car, he ran and got a piece of the fire hydrant and started, banging her in the head with it and killed her. Because of his attachment to her. He felt ownership over her. She's my girlfriend, or she's my wife, whatever. I mean, they'd had a child together, so he probably felt that she's mine. And this sort of attachment, it creates all of our problems, sometimes you might have a favourite chair, right? And then you walk in and someone's sitting in your chair, that's my chair. And the feelings of negativity well up. So the more we have this feeling of ownership of, this is me, this is mine, the more we have that, the more we feel this feeling of negativity and separation. So the idea is in egolessness is recognising that there is no me, there is no mine, ultimately. I've created this idea. It's a false. Actually, we saw at the beginning about the three, in Buddhism, the three seals of Buddhism: impermanence, egolessness, and nirvana. Impermanence means everything's changing, everything's flowing like the river. It's here now, but it's gone one day. Even our lives are gone. So, since everything's impermanent, there's no point having attachment to anything. Because if we attach ourselves to something, one day when it changes, we're going to suffer. So, yeah, this is a real key to it. So everyone's got the brown book. In our brown book on page 57, we've got Words of Awakening, step-by-step teaching. We're going to recite that sutra, because in it talks about, there is no me, there is no mine. So the path to emancipation is the path of egolessness, because the less you associate with yourself, as he said, discard your self-centered views. Do not think this is me. Do not think this is mine. He said that the more that we have this attachment to the self, the more that when I meet people I don't like them because of this some aspect about myself. So everything is really about discovering who my true self is, as opposed to my false self. So Master said, in order to abandon such attachment, you just have to let go of the thought of, this is mine. There is no me, there is no mine. I'm just living temporarily in this body to undergo soul training, and that's me, Steve Bellingham, standing here right now, is Steve Bellingham playing a part in this particular life, in this role. Same for John, you're living in this particular life, in this particular role. Kamel is your mother, but she's your mother in this life, So all of us have got these lives that we're living, but it's not really us. It's just our role in this particular life. Let's not get attached to this particular role in this particular life. That's the main thing. Never be too attached to it, because it's not forever. It's a short period of time. And later on, when we reflect back on our lives, the more we can be egoless and not think, this is myself, I've got to protect myself, the more we can be an easygoing, free sort of a person, just aiming to be closer to the light, be a person that's full of love and harmony. The more we can look back and say, gosh, I lived my life, I'm glad I lived my life like that, with a carefree state of mind. Egolessness is about having a carefree state of mind, because we don't have any attachments. There's nothing. If someone's sitting in my chair, that doesn't matter. That's not my chair anyway. I don't have anything. There is no me. There is no mine. Yeah. So the suffering goes away. That's the whole idea of having this egoless perspective. It's not to try to do anything other than just to alleviate the suffering based on the truth. So Master said the idea of egolessness was not meant to imply that there's no such thing as a physical self. He said that your true being is an existence that came into being when the creator of the universe, the Primordial God, wanted to bring it into being as a manifestation of light. So we have to be able to remember the origin of our existence, and when we do that, we can become one with God. Master said, and I'm going to move quickly here because we've a little short on time, but he said the essential nature of egolessness first requires that you become one with Buddha. But if you are too concerned about yourself, Buddha's light cannot come shining into you. Now, one of the things about becoming egolessness, as it's saying here, is that when you remember your origin, I'm a child of God. I am one with God. Right? My nature is one with God. Okay, nothing can hurt me. Nothing. I can never die. Right? I'm just this existence that's part of God. Now, the more we can feel that and become one with that, the more that we can become egoless. There's not this, I'm Steve, and that's my chair, and that's my table, and that's my house, and that's my land, and now I've got to worry about all this stuff. I don't own anything. I'm just one with God, and I'm going through this experience in this particular time as part of God's manifestation of me trying to become closer to God, trying to understand God, trying to understand myself, trying to grow towards God. Master's always taught happiness comes from us growing and becoming closer to God. In our lives, as we become closer to God, we feel happier and happier, because we become more full of light, we become more full of love. And that's the whole purpose of our existence on earth. Egolessness is really about understanding and becoming that, because the more egoless we become, the more pure our nature. And Master said here, he said, if you are too concerned about yourself, Buddha's light cannot come shining into you. So Buddha's light, when we become egoless, there's no, as we've learned before in Happy Science, we've got a thought tape. And our thought tape is between the other world and between our true self. And this thought tape, all day long, we're thinking different things. If I've got some sort of negative thoughts, it's like clouds on a cloudy day blocking the sunlight. But when I become egoless, I don't have all those clouds. Egoless means that there are no thoughts. My mind's really pure, and it's really easy for me to be able to receive the light from heaven. So all day long you can just feel like this warmth in your heart, because you don't have any thoughts going around like, I'm angry because of this. This person did this to me, and now I'm really angry. I'm really upset about that. Even to the extent and there's no limit. This is on every level of life. I remember Master Kawa talking about, once he was talking about forgiveness, and he spoke about how just imagine that, a father who had his daughter who was killed by a truck driver who got tired and fell asleep and crossed the middle lane and had a car crash and killed his beautiful 16-year-old daughter. As a father, you'd feel like you'd have every right to be angry, so furious because you killed my daughter. See, once again, we've got this my daughter coming into it, right? If it had been someone he didn't know, he would not even know, he would not even feel anything. But the fact he's associating with, this is my daughter, and he's killed my daughter, he could spend the rest of his life in resentment and hatred and anger towards that truck driver who made a mistake and fell asleep. So, once again, if we can really understand that in eternity, right, this daughter also, she will leave this world, she'll go back to the heavenly world, right? She will take her place in the heavenly world, eventually be born back into this world. He, once again, he will leave this world one day. He will be able to see her again. And his love for her never has to die just because she's not in this world. The love continues in the heart. So you can give up that feeling because whatever's happened has happened. You cannot change what's happened, right? But what you can change is the way you look at it. So instead, if he thinks, well, my daughter died at such a young age, but I don't know her life plan. I don't know God's plan for her. There must have been a reason why her life died. She died at 16. Maybe somehow in a past life she had accidentally killed somebody at a young age and she wanted to experience dying young herself. We don't know God's great reasons behind everything, but all we can do is accept them and realise that I have no ownership over anything. I'm just part of the whole. I'm just part of God, and everything that's happening around me is happening around me, and I just shouldn't be attached to what's happening. All I can ever do is do my best in every given situation to try to become as close to God as I can, and to be able to be giving out the thoughts and the feelings of God as much as possible. So this is the idea of egolessness. There is no attachment, there is no me, there is no mine, there is no my daughter, my mother, my son, my land, my money. Everything is just, I temporarily have this in this moment given by God, and at any moment it could be gone away. I just don't own it. It just is what it is. And so, Master said the Buddhist approach to becoming one with Buddha. So we're talking about how to become egolessness. And he says there's two approaches. One is in Buddhism, we can practice self-reflection meditation, try to get rid of the thoughts of me, I am, look for them within the mind, and in meditation, get rid of those and feel one with God. He said also in the Christian approach is through prayer. They pray to God and feel one with God and feel close to God through prayer. Master said that's one way to achieve egolessness. He said another way, because some people are not religious people, how can they become egoless? Well, the way for them to become egoless is altruism, through loving others. He said if you live for the benefit of others, feel others' pain and sorrow as if it were your own, and feel others' joy and happiness as your own, and live with a loving heart, you can become egoless because you become one with them. And so there is a feeling of... So Master said, in short, there's basically these two ways to become egoless. One's to become one with Buddha or God, and the other's to become one with other people. And this is all just a path for improving and nurturing the soul. So becoming egoless takes us away from this worldly perspective into the world of truth, into the world of who I really am, my soul, my spiritual being. Okay, so Master said one thing about this is that people who aren't egoless, this is one of the big problems for people who go to hell. I mean, as we know, Master is able to converse with spirits in the other world. And that's why, happy science, he is called happy science, or the science of happiness. It tries to take a very rational approach. So he explores the other world and finds what sort of mindset causes people to go to heaven, or what sort of mindset also causes some people to fall to hell. And he said one of the things about the people in the other world is they all have some sort of attachment to an ego. So they had a strong idea of, this is me, and this is mine. And so Master said that often that these people who have this feeling, they become stray spirits. Because if a person says, this is me, like for instance, many people, houses become haunted. When people leave this world, they die and they feel, this is my house, right? This is my house. And they die and they don't have any belief in the other world. So when they die, they don't go back to the heavenly world. They become an earthbound spirit living here, thinking, this is my house. And they just end up in suffering because they're not moving on, and they try to bother the people who buy the house, so other people move in, and next thing they're having problems because somebody was haunting us. And you know what, over the long term, this also creates more problems for the person, because if a person, back to the law of cause and effect that we spoke about and recited in the Dharma, was that if you believe in the law of cause and effect, you'll only want to create good causes. Well, haunting somebody and trying to create harm on them and trying to create turmoil in their life isn't a good cause. If you try to, as a haunting spirit, try to create turmoil in somebody's house, it's going to have a negative effect on your future lives as well. So, and they're obviously in a state of suffering, because if they have an attachment, this is my house and someone's living in my house, that's a mind that's disturbed, right? They could completely give that up. This is not my house. This was a house that God gave me and I lived in for a while, but everything's impermanent, right? It's time for me to move on. I'm a spiritual being. It's time for me to go back to heaven and start a whole new life, a whole new world. What a different way of thinking, right? This is just based on thinking. Thinking makes the difference here. If I think that this is my house, this is my body, I live here, I've got to try and keep hold of this, compared to thinking that, hey, everything's temporary, nothing's permanent. I'm not really a physical body, I'm a spiritual being. It's time for me to return back to heaven. Can we see the two absolutely different outcomes on happiness? One leads to happiness, one leads to suffering. One's based on the truth. That's the main thing. This is all about understanding the truth. So Master here, this is a 5-minute lecture of Master. He talks about how the soul's saved, and this is related to attachment, and which is obviously closely connected to egolessness.
I would like you to know that this world is not your ultimate home. The world you enter after leaving this world is your original and ultimate home. Therefore, please know that you need to redesign your life for the next world. Please open your heart and listen to your guiding spirits, angels of light, or beings like monks or angels. Please set aside the education that you might have received in this world, or the information propagated by the mass media. Just listen to what your guides have to say with an open mind. They are not lying or doing something to deceive you. They are there to help you. You need to know that this world is not the true world. Therefore, you need to shed your over-attachment to it. Otherwise, you won't be happy in the next world. This world is a transient world, and the other world is the real world. Now that you have returned to the real world, there is nothing to regret. The true purpose of your life is to pursue happiness in the other world. The only reason for you to come to this world is to train your soul for several decades in your physical body. I would like you to accept this truth. Given that this world is not the world you truly belong to, you need to shed your over-attachment to things considered valuable in this world. Excessive attachment leads to a state of mind where you are unable to think of anything else. There is greed, for instance. If you persistently desire this or that which belongs to this world, you may not make the transition to the other world easily. When you return to the other world, you do not need to eat to sustain yourself. You may be concerned that you haven't eaten for many days. But in the other world, you don't die without eating, because you are already a spirit. You don't need a shelter either. You can survive without one. The change in temperature does not really exist. You may feel hot or cold only as a function of your mind. As you are now back to where you truly belong, I encourage you to start anew and aim toward fulfilling your life in the other world. People you have left behind will join you in a few years or decades. Everyone will go through a similar experience in turn. No one will remain in this world for good. If you are angry that your life in this world was suddenly terminated, you would stand to lose. You would agonize over something inevitable. If you hold a grudge against somebody or something, it would be you who suffer from that grudge. Therefore, it is important for you to rid yourself of anger. If you feel lost as a result of your ignorance of God's truth, I hope you are humble enough to consider your mistake now. If you have had a prejudice against religion, or have ridiculed, scorned, derided, or ill-treated people who try to tell you about God's truth, who advanced their missionary work or passed out their monthly publications. I hope you grasp this chance to repent. You have made the mistake of misunderstanding the people who approached you in good faith. If you admit your mistake and feel sorry, then you will begin to be saved. It means that angels will start working to save your soul. Also, excessive self-pride may interfere with your transition to the other world. You may have had something to be proud of while living in this world. You may have been wealthy. You may have hailed from a distinguished family. You may have held a high-regarded position professionally. You may have graduated from a famous university. You may have been very beautiful. You may have enjoyed political power. You may have taken pride in these attributes which are valued in this world. However, such self-conceit is nothing but mere attachment to this world, because those attributes are highly compatible with this world. If you believe that you were happy when you received a favorable assessment from other people, I suggest you reconsider that view of happiness. Take some distance from that view and learn to be humble. I sincerely hope that departed souls remember these simple points. As angels begin to work on saving these souls, I hope these souls let go of their suspicions and open their heart to what the angels have to say.
So Master said that the spirits of hell are bound by attachment, and they cause their attachments the ego, and that heaven's an altruistic world where all the inhabitants live for the benefit of others. This is the state of being egoless. Yeah, so this is, once we understand, and back to it again, the truth about who we really are. And hearing Master Okawa speak like that, you can see so much of the people in this world that they base their lives on those things that he was talking about, the positions or the money or how people speak to them. So people are trying to seek power for themselves in various ways. But it's really meaningless in the truth. In the world of truth, it's meaningless. So Master said that the egoless is a theory of salvation. Whether you return to heaven or hell depends on whether or not you can eliminate your ego. So he said, although this may sound paradoxical, the ego must be eliminated while simultaneously being refined and developed. So why is that? He said that spiritual discipline is something you undertake for your own benefit. It's a way of improving and developing yourself. And in this context, the ego or self may be perceived as something that is allowed to exist. So I might want to do really well in my life, right? I do want to really do well in my life. And Deb, you try really hard. You actually study a lot and you do different things. So you can think, oh, well, I do all this stuff and I put so much time into me and making my efforts. Is that wrong? But Master said no, because he said that if your self-discipline is directed in the direction of the will of Buddha, it will lead to you become one with Buddha, and eventually you will approach the state of egolessness. So if everything you're doing is based on, not because you want people to look at you in a certain way and you want to lift yourself up above other people to be able to gain power over them, if the reason you want to do well in this life is because you want to bring happiness and benefit more people, this is the will of God, the will of Buddha. Buddha wants us to become people who can contribute to the happiness of other people. So this is the nice thing with egolessness. Egolessness doesn't mean becoming bland like jelly and not saying anything and not being strong. It means actually being a person who can be really refined. Remember who your true self is. Remember that you just want to be a light of God. You are the light of God. And that you yourself want to shine your light in this world as bright as possible. So egolessness doesn't mean that you don't want to be noticed and you have to be hidden and you can't have people seeing you having done something great. It's not like that at all. God wants us to be great, but he wants us to do great things not for ourselves, because he wants us to do great things because our greatness brings happiness and brings good light to the world, to other people. So it needs to benefit other people. So if our thoughts are always in doing great things that lead to the benefit of other people, that's still in line with egolessness. We don't have to stop trying, right? So he says, similarly, if your self-discipline is directed towards the path of altruism with the aim of saving others, then you will also be led to the state of egolessness. So either trying to become one with God and follow the will of God, or just living your life trying to help other people and not thinking of yourself and living your life to do good things to help other people. Either one of these will lead to the state of egolessness. So Master said that, we're nearly at the end here, but he said that, devoting yourself to your own study, setting aside, and I thought of you, Debbie, when I saw this. I thought devoting yourself to your own study, setting aside time for yourself and taking care of your own health, a necessary part of your self-discipline. These attitudes may seem to increase your ego, but as long as you're moving in the direction of Buddha, an altruistic direction, you're approaching the state of egolessness. So it's good to try hard. It's good to really push ourselves on that. It's not, it's not ego to be doing that. It's only ego if we think that I'm doing that so I can control other people and people should, bow down to me because I'm great. He said, but if your self-development results in attachment to the things of this world or the earthly way of life, then you are on the wrong path, which will eventually lead you to hell, because we become too attached to things of this world. So just to finish up then, I've got this words of, each month from our monthly messages that we put out, there's the beautiful words of wisdom or words of the mind that come out. And this one I thought was really relevant to the idea of egolessness. So this lasts for about 4 minutes, and it's just got some nice music playing behind it. So just read the words and contemplate the words, and try to just feel the light contained within the words. Okay, so we're just about finished. But, so there it was saying about the smaller self. So the smaller self is, in another way of describing it, is the false self. We have a true self and a false self. The true self is our divine nature or soul, and the false self is our ego. So becoming egoless, as in other words that were up on the screen there, it said, looking at your life through the eyes of your soul. If we can see our lives through our eyes of our soul, then we don't see it through the eyes of this being, this body that we're living in. We don't make all of our judgments based on this me. We can make our judgments and our viewpoint from the eyes of our soul, which means the bigger picture, the soul that lives in eternity, the soul that's playing a part in this particular life at this particular time. And it's, what sort of part do I want to play? What do I want? How do I want to be, when I reflect back on my life later, how do I want to see my life as having been? So this is about becoming egoless. Egoless means not associating with our physical self, but not thinking that everything ends when we die, that we continue to exist, that our self as a soul continues to exist, our true self, and that this true self as a soul is being refined and developed forever and ever, closer and closer back towards God, becoming closer and closer to God. So everything we should do should be thinking about, what can I do to bring out my divine nature? What would God want me to do in this moment right now? What would my true self, should it do right now? And living that way is a way to live an egoless life. So it's not about trying to diminish ourselves and trying to be bland and trying to have no texture or flavour. It's about being bright, but shining our own light in the world in our own unique way. Like being individual chandeliers, all different colours of light, all different aspects of God's light, shining brightly. So that's about being egoless. We're shining our true divine nature, but without any falseness behind it, without any ego behind it, without any feeling like I want to control other people or I need to be praised for shining my light. I'm just shining my light because I love shining my light. I'm not doing it because I want people to tell me and give me praise or anything like that. So yeah, this is about being egoless. So I think that we can try to. This idea of egolessness is really close to enlightenment. If you can live an egoless life, you're living an enlightened life, because you're living the life of a soul. You're living your life from the eyes of the soul and remembering eternity and never being attached to this body. And nothing can make you suffer. Nothing can make you feel anger. Nothing can make you feel greedy. You don't have the foolishness in your mind because everything's based on the truth. So that is, I don't think we really have time for Q&A unless somebody has a quick question. We give a quick answer, but we've gone through time because we started late. But does anybody have a question? Look at that. And we want to do Debbie's ceremony as well. So let's take a break for get a water, toilets, things like that, and in about 10 minutes' time we'll reconvene and do devotion to Three Treasures. Okay, thank you very much.